Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, a regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq market site, we have Dr. Robert Bishop, Vice Chancellor and Dean of the College of Engineering at Texas A&M University, Dr. Russell Rhoads, Associate Clinical Professor of Finance at the Indiana University Kelley School of Business, Dr. Per Stromhaug, he is the Economic Development Senior Officer at the University of Buffalo, as well as Glenn Kurban, Graduate Instructor at the Robinson School of Business at Georgia State University. It is great to have all of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Let's go around the horn quickly. Dr. Bishop, we'll start with you. What you're doing within academia at Texas A&M.
Sure. So I am, as a Vice Chancellor, I am responsible for engineering across the system. There are 11 universities in the Texas A&M system. The Dean of Engineering, I'm the Dean at the main school on campus in College Station. 25,000 engineering students and 800 faculty. And the system also encompasses 8 state agencies in the state of Texas. And I am the executive director of one of those state agencies, Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station. And
Dr. Rhoads, what do you have going on in Indiana?
At Indiana, I'm a clinic. What you had that long title for me.
Associate Clinical Professor of Finance.
That's what I do. I teach corporate finance, investments, and derivatives at the graduate level. I also work closely with the undergrads. I'm in charge of the finance club, and I deal with all of our outreach with organizations like the Chartered Financial Analyst Program, CMT, Kaya, and any other case competitions. I tend to be heavily involved in those things as well. So getting the practical applications for the kids through doing some stuff that complements what we're learning in the classroom.
All right, and the University of Buffalo.
Well, I do economic development. So what we're trying to do is to increase the impact that university has in the community, and we do that by a variety of different ways. We have programs that will support innovations coming out into the community or the society as new products. On one side. On the other side, we also try to connect industry and companies with our faculty, so make sure that the expertise we have on campus, the centers, the resources, instrumentation, industry can actually use that to improve their products and create new products and create jobs in the communities. Everything we do is trying to increase that impact that university has in the community and in the region.
And Glenn, the work that you're doing at Georgia State University.
Yes, I teach a graduate course in internal audit for the Robinson School of Business within the accounting program. And so my students typically CPA bound, but also need that sort of background in IT audit or audit in general that might prepare them for their futures. Additionally, I'm a part of the consulting advisory board at Georgia State. And of course, in my day job, I'm U.S. head of DNA, data and analytics at Capco Financial Services Consulting Group.
And what's exciting to me about having such an accomplished panel of academia on Trade Talks is how we're bridging those gaps between government policy, industry, and the public understanding of what's a rapidly evolving tech landscape. Dr. Bishop, if you could tell us, some of the work that you're doing and how large research universities are there to bridge this gap.
I think that universities like Texas A&M are uniquely positioned to really bridge the gap between the technology development and the application. So for example, our leadership at Texas A&M over the last years have created a campus called the Relish Campus, which is devoted to this connection. So we have major hypersonic wind tunnels out there. We are creating and building a space institute down at the NASA Johnson Space Center, $200 million investment that will allow companies to come in to do space research and space advances. To give you an example, it'll have a lunar scape and it'll have a Mars scape. Each of those scapes is big enough to put our football stadium in. Wow. We're also putting laboratories on orbit on the International Space Station as a place for industry, government, and students to learn, how to advance technology. But I think the key is that we are excellence at scale. So I think that really matters in terms of having the impact and reach that is necessary today.
Yeah, and Russell, the key is here project-oriented outcomes versus traditional classroom learning, so that you get that experience while you're in school, while you're interning, so that you're ready once you graduate.
Oh, absolutely. And in the business space and in business education, there are basic building blocks that you need to understand. and as an undergrad, master before you really start interning and making a difference as an intern, or being a valuable employee to a potential employee to an employer. So anything that you can do in the classroom that brings the real world in, helps prepare them for that. And I've found that the United States, that our university system and the way that we have public-private partnerships, it's much better than other parts of the world. I'm going to mention one of your competitors. I do a college outreach thing for Eurex over in Germany every year. And because I had 20 years of hedge fund experience before I went into the academic space, I have different stories to tell. I have different things to tell the European students. And part of the feedback I always get is, we only have academics teaching us this part. We really don't get the industry experience until we get out of school. But I think most successful universities in the U.S. Have people doing very well before they even get out into the professional world.
And that's the value of the public-private partnerships, to make sure that you're prepared, whether coming out of school or even reskilling the workforce, so that they have the appropriate skill sets to be successful as technology is evolving quickly.
So that's exactly what we're trying to do. So, this shouldn't be a barrier between going to school and after. So we're trying to bring basically the community industry into campus and bring campus out into the community, so that students can get that experience. Faculty start companies. They didn't do that before. Now they can actually start companies. We support them doing that. Getting resources for them, connecting them to community, to investors, to talent. We connect companies directly to talent on campus, which is not necessarily course-based. It's all about getting that hands-on experience with the company, so they understand what's it look like, right, to work in a startup company or an industry, or what kind of practical training do I need, so that's what we really focus on today. And I think it's all come from that need that everyone wants to see that the dollars you give to universities have the highest possible impact, and that's just not research outcome. It's really the whole gamut from getting the training, the research, the inventions, the workforce development. We do a lot of that, just that training of students and everyone to be ready for the workforce, so that when they get into the workforce, they know actually what they're supposed to be doing.
So Glenn, let's ask this question another way. What skills should companies prioritize with new grads versus reskilling existing talent?
I think you know the answer, right? So what I've been doing in this IT audit course, I've found that there's an opportunity to start animating and really creating more relevance in the content and materials to prepare these students more appropriately for the real working world. So, one example is we've taken, again, this is IT audit, so we've taken some of the conventional tools that we've used for 2 decades to do data audits and analyze data and all this stuff. We've done projects around that, but we've then had them replicate that same work using Gen AI capabilities, and actually done A/B testing and compare and contrast results, and really determined, how the technology that's available today, in some cases, is leaps and bounds beyond, where we've been traditionally with some of these other tools. And it's really been quite a ride to see, the things that the students have been able to uncover.
Yes. Oh, I thought you were making a comment. Actually, I have a question for you. I thought you were going to follow on to that. But why is academia uniquely positioned when it comes to foundational R&D, when you think about de-risking innovation and what that means for industry and preparing the next gen? Why not go through industry or government? What's unique about academia R&D?
Well, several things. First of all, we, by our very nature, we have the intellectual firepower to reach across areas, not just engineering, but engineering, mathematics, business, policy. So we have all that in one space. But I feel very strongly that the research that we do in academia needs to transition. So right now at Texas A&M Engineering, last year we had about $455 million in research expenditures, okay, but in the traditional way. And what I'm doing now is I'm creating and forming a 501c3 nonprofit company inside the university, okay? And what that allows us to do is it allows us to reach industry and to reach the DoD and the government in a new way. And that way is contracts versus grants, okay? And here's the beauty of that, is that not only can we develop new technologies that are needed, so this is applied, but we can also address the acquisition delays. So, for example, working with industry, working with the government, the acquisition takes a long time. And then when you add on top our bureaucracy in academia, it can take too long to get going. So with this concept, I'm calling it the Inspire Alliance. I can bring companies, I can bring universities, I can bring government entities together, and we can address the acquisition speed right at the front, so that when some new technology is needed, we don't have to go through all the contractual headaches that you typically have to go through. So that's where I think we offer this unique capability. We're not competing with industry. We're not competing with the government. We're trying to build a bridge between those, and also a bridge between the various universities, so that we're not competing among the universities as well. We have strengths in AI and hypersonics and space, but there are other areas that we're not strong in, but other universities are very strong in. So with this kind of structure that I'm talking about here, we can tie it together. So that's where I feel very strongly that academia needs to reimagine, still do the grants,
Right.
NSF, NIH, and so forth, but we need another component to our research portfolio.
Which is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think the key there is that we have to make sure the faculty research students understand what the problems in the society is. So it's not that you just get a grant, you do what you can do, but you actually know that, hey, these are the challenges that industry has right now, or community organizations, or cities, or whatever it is, so that you can use that to inform what you should be doing with your research dollars too. And that's when you can create those new things that really can have impact in the community. And I think that's kind of what shifted a lot over the last 5 to 10 years, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn, we've spoken about this a number of times, that with these emerging technologies, look for a problem to solve.
That's right.
Don't provide a solution where the problem doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. So
Absolutely.
I think having the flexibility and being nimble with a program such as the Inspire Alliance is refreshing in today's environment, especially.
Yeah. No, I think, Georgia State, as an example, does a really good job of engaging people like me from the outside that are not traditional in education folks, coming in with experience that I can then pass on. I do a lot with guest speakers in the classroom, so folks that are, CISOs and heads of internal audit that really try to bring the material to life. And for me, if they walk out with something more than what, I read to them off a slide or out of a textbook, mission accomplished. And I think we saw some really good successes in the past semester.
Yeah, and it's a catalyst.
Just a couple of other things with the universities being uniquely positioned. And this is probably more unique to the business school, but we have alumni we have a massive alumni network here in New York. We probably have people at every investment bank. And if I were doing research in that space and I needed to talk to some practitioners, I could probably find people at multiple firms to talk to that would be willing to talk to me, because we're like Indiana's a central thing that they have in common. And then the other thing, just with respect to universities, our motivations are not quite the same as private industry, and we're not being judged with quarterly earnings. So, we can go out there and take a shot at something that we think may make sense research-wise, and may just be basic research that's never monetized. Sometimes it's used in ways that we don't even expect it to be used. You'd be amazed at how many academic papers they have on trading desks around Wall Street.
Yes.
They turn that stuff into products and trading strategies.
Yes, they
frequently.
certainly do.
Can I add real quick to both of these comments? So I think part of the ability of something like the alliance that I was talking about, Inspire Alliance, is that when you talk about preparing students, okay, one of the ways to do that is to have them working on real problems while they're in school. And so when you're doing applied engineering, you can have undergraduates and graduate students and faculty working on real problems while they're in school to help prepare them. And the other part is that I agree that our metrics for success aren't the same as if you were in industry. However, we do have some metrics that don't really contribute to this. The number of papers you've published, the amount of grants you brought in, how many citations you have. I'm saying that there's something we can do in addition to that.
Right.
Still, you can do that. But how about how many problems you've solved? How many applications of your work has appeared in industry?
Right, and
as a product?
that's an excellent point that you make, because that is a problem in academia that we do have to address. how many papers have you put your name on? How many times have you been cited? How are you using the data to perhaps fit your thesis? I mean, that's nothing new. And I think it's a great point that you brought up in terms of there's not that competition like you would have with private companies. We brought this up in CES when we were talking about innovation with autos and automation. Do you share what you've learned when it comes to safety data, or is that proprietary? Is that trademarked? Is there IP restrictions attached to that? Whereas the commonality here is the academic side of it, where you're not protecting a specific piece of proprietary data or reporting earnings, to your point.
Yeah, no, I always like to think of something that's been very successful, and again, I'm going to mention a competitor, sorry.
Totally fine.
VIX. I mean, VIX came from the academic world,
Yep.
and then ended up, being a common way that we can measure anticipated market volatility. And Dr. Whaley
Yep.
at Vanderbilt, he's the one that went away for a summer and came back with what we have now as the VIX methodology. I wonder if you caught him in a room and he was off the record, if he would admit that maybe inventing VIX is better than any citation he ever got.
Right.
Which one would be? I personally, if I could create an index that's utilized by industry, I would be much more proud of that than how many times my books have been cited in in papers about VIX.
Right. Well, I mean, it's almost like until you get on the job, that's when you learn and you can apply what you've learned in school, which is why I think internships and the type of academic R&D that's being done in programs such as yours it's invaluable.
It is. I mean, we train people that actually go out and start a company that create jobs. That's our goal, right? We want everything they do to be applicable and result in something. And even if it doesn't, at least they have the training to do it again. Because if you start a company, it fails the first time very often, right? But you have done it, you have tried it, you know how to do it, you get a better idea next time, and then you will succeed at some point. So that's sort of one of the goals we have, right? So how do you just get them to do it real life so that you actually learn from it? It's just not a textbook exercise.
Right. And as quickly as the technology is evolving, let's think about it, through the lens of Moore's Law as an example. Some of these, some of the steps that you go through when you're conducting this research is going to be static. You're going to learn that process, whether it's business management, the math that goes behind it, the structure of actually doing academic research. That ethos still remains.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, I go back to the comments here. There's no better action than doing, right? So how do we get folks and students in this case working on real problems in the classroom? What I tried to do as an instructor in this particular course is actually bring things from the outside, things that I've been tussling with in the real world, obviously confidential, but throw these to the class and see if these bright minds can sort of figure out ways to work these problems out. And in some ways that's better than any research that you could possibly do, because you're actually crowdsourcing problems to people that maybe have a different perspective than you do. And I love the idea of actually being able to lever the classroom that way, and they obviously get great experience out of it.
And in the last couple of minute and a half here, Dr. Bishop, I want to talk about academic trust, and I alluded to that earlier. In the age of AI and emerging tech, and certainly academic institutions, they have been put on a pedestal, recently, but how do we maintain that trust and the integrity with research across the board, across all industry?
I think I feel strongly that in academia, we have to be the source of information about whether we should do something. In addition to how can we do that? Okay, so there's where the ethics come in, which I think is critically important, and I feel strongly that academia has to play a key role in that arena. And as we start to think about transitioning, in addition, it's not really transitioning, but in addition to grants, looking at contracts, there it's going to become very important, because there we will be required to produce things. Well, sometimes you might be tempted, right? So academia, I predict that we will solve that, and we will be seen as a group that you go to when you need to know the real answer. So when industry comes to us or the government comes to us and says, should we do this? We can say, we don't think so. Or we can say, yes, we think so. Should we put AI, autonomous systems on a machine? Well, maybe we can use the AI autonomous systems to consider less than lethal solutions to reduce conflict. That's where I feel strongly that we can play a role, is we can say, look, that's one way to do it, here's another way to do it. And we can also find ways to use the technology to inform the decision makers and the policy makers. Here are a bunch of options for you. We don't pick one of those options because that's not our role.
Right.
So
I think the key there is that we have to do that in partnership with our community organizations, right? So it's not just industry, it's the local workforce, it's economic development, like I'm on the board of the Buffalo Niagara Partnership, for example, and community organizations, everything. If you do that in a partnership together, so you always have that communication, then you build that trust.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do. And that's what universities in the old days maybe didn't do that enough. And today we realize that all these big programs out there, you have to do that. It's all built for this partnership across a lot of different disciplines. Yep. And that's what we have to do.
15 seconds.
Sure. You were talking about being a sounding board, and I assume the other side's private industry. You didn't mention profitability once, which is good. That's what the academic world should be looking at.
Agree.
Is more, is the non-financial impact of different discoveries, et cetera. So I love that you. I was afraid you were going to mention the money thing.
Well, it's good that we're all aligned in that respect. Appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.